Okay, hello everyone. Good evening. Be sure to let me know if you can hear me. Be sure to leave a message in the chat box to let me know that you're watching and to let me know how your week has gone. So none of you so far. Here we go. So Françoise has joined us, as has Evelyn. Good evening to the pair of you. Thank you for joining. Hello, hello. Hi, Anya. Nice to meet you again. Yes. Hi, Rosanna. Hi, Jean-Fabrice. Nice to meet you again. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining this evening. We'll wait one more minute to see if anyone else joins us, and then we will get started. So I hope you have all had a lovely week, or weekend, I should say, as we are on Tuesday. Yes, I hope everyone has heard the recent announcement of Macron, and that they're looking forward to the start of the déconfinement, so the beginning of the easing of lockdown, we would say in English, the easing of lockdown, or easing of restrictions. Restrictions, the easing of lockdown. Hello everyone, thank you for joining. Okay, so in terms of our lesson for today, we're continuing with our theme of the history and culture of the British Isles. So last week you may have seen myself talking about more the sort of geography of the British Isles and the various nations and sovereign states that make up those isles, as well as some of the other smaller islands and their relationship to those countries and states. Okay, so today's lesson continues in the same vein. So we're going to be talking about history and culture, more specifically the history and the origins of the English language. So all of you are here because you're interested in learning to speak English, how it's spoken now. But English has been around for a long time, just as French has as well. And it has a long and interesting history that I would like to tell you about and talk about some of the general origins of the English language. And on the way, I can also teach you some vocabulary and talk about some things to avoid when speaking English, perhaps because they look like they might mean the same thing in French, but perhaps don't mean the same thing despite having the same origins. Okay, and this is particularly the case in French, as there's a lot of overlap between English and French vocabulary due to the shared origins of both languages. So my first question to you is, how many countries in the world do you think speak English? And if you know any countries that speak English, also be sure to write them down, because it's more than just England or the UK or the USA. There are many more countries that speak English than just simply the UK and the USA. So what are those countries? How many of them are there? Does anyone have any ideas? Be sure to write it in the chat box. So Anya has said Australia and New Zealand. So New Zealand is spelled with an A, New Zealand. Don't forget that countries are always capitalized. They always use the big letter. And yes, Rosanna, I will slow down. My apologies. I will speak more slowly. Je vais parler un peu plus lentement, plus doucement aussi. So yes, Australia. So Jean-Fabrice has said the east of Africa, because not all of them speak English. And so we also have Mauritius. We also have Mauritius. I believe there might be some connection issues, so my apologies for that. My apologies. So hopefully that's corrected itself, but we will see what's happening there. Okay, so we'll continue to try. So yes, Zabe has suggested, are we talking about places that speak English as an official language? Yes, more so places where English is an official language, okay? Françoise has said Mauritius, yes. Mauritius, that's one place where English is spoken, although I think French is also an important language, although I'm not sure on that one. Rosanna has said India, and is India. Okay. Evelyn has said the Maldives, yes. The Maldives. The Maldives do indeed speak English, I believe, as a language. South Africa, yes. Canada, yes. Some Caribbean islands, yes, many Caribbean islands speak English as well as French or Spanish, and also Creole languages, as is Malta. As Rosanna, yes, Rosanna correctly notes that many of these countries that speak English are places that were colonized by the British Empire, and so that is one of the main reasons why English is spoken in many of these countries. Francois has said French and English in Mauritius, so it's a good place to become fluent. Yes, you can speak both languages there. Hi everyone, hi Catherine, thank you for joining us. And as Jean-Fabrice has said, yes, the USA. The USA is a good start as well. Virginie correctly notes that English is multinational, so many countries speak English. My understanding is that more than 50 countries speak English as an official language. I think more towards 70 or so, give or take a few. Okay, but so English is spoken all around the world, not only by these countries as a first language, but also by many as a second or third language. But where does English come from? You might be forgiven for saying, well, England, because England and English have the same sort of roots. However, English and its history are much more complex, and there are lots of ways and reasons as to why English exists as the way it does now. So is anyone familiar with the idea of language families? So essentially, the idea that languages fall into certain groups depending on how related they are to one another. So I'll write that down. Language families. So for example, French, Spanish, Italian, Romanian, Portuguese, Catalan, and Occitan are all languages that fall under the same broad language family. The same way that Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian, Polish, and Serbian or Serbo-Croat all fall under as well the same broad language family. Okay. So as Rosanna has said, yes, there's Latin. So one of these language families are Romance languages, and these languages, the Romance languages. So the Romance languages are languages that come from Latin. And as Anya has said as well, the Eastern European languages that I spoke about are either called Slavic languages, and more broadly, Balto-Slavic. So this includes the Baltic states and the languages spoken there. So M has suggested the Anglo-Saxon family. So English falls under the category called Germanic languages. So Germanic languages includes German, it includes Dutch, it includes Swedish, Norwegian, Icelandic, and also English, as well as some of the other languages spoken in Western/Northern Europe. Okay. Okay, so let's have a look in detail then at some of the origins of English. So who is it who said this? M has suggested that there's Anglo-Saxon. So this is one of the earlier incarnations of English, the Anglo-Saxon. So where do we think sort of Anglo-Saxon comes from? Old English. Where do we think that comes from? Does anyone know where that comes from? Where do we think that comes from? So Britain, or Britannia as it was called at the time, was a province of the Roman Empire, and then a group of people arrived in Britannia and were the first Germanic, well, not the first, they were a group of Germanic speaking people who came and settled in the island that we now call on the island that we now call Great Britain. So Anya has suggested Scandinavia. Scandinavia is a bit later, we'll come on to that. So we have two main groups. We have Angles and we have Utes. So these two groups come from Northern Europe, roughly what we would call today, sort of roughly where the Netherlands are, where Belgium is, sort of the Low Countries, and this peninsula or the edge of Northern Europe. Yes. So the Saxons, as M has suggested, from Saxa in Germany, yes. So Anglo-Saxons or Anglo-Utes came from this area and settled in Britain. So this is where the majority of the Germanic influences in English come from. So words, can anyone think of any words in English that might come from Germanic roots? So all of you will know some words in English that come from Germanic roots. Usually, these are words that are used in day-to-day usage, words that are very common. Okay, so think about members of the family, where people live. What kind of words do we think come from German or Germanic languages, are Germanic in origin? Does anyone have any ideas? So Anya has suggested mother. Yes, mother is a Germanic rooted word. Isabel has said father. Yes, father. Evelyn has said young. Young. Yes, this also is a Germanic rooted word. Veronique, yes, house. House is a Germanic origin word. And as Emma suggested as well, grandmother. But I would say the issue we have here is the grand part is more Latin in origin, my understanding is. However, mother is still Germanic. Although there are still similar words in Latin like mater, so perhaps there's some overlap there. Okay, so yes, words like mother, father, brother, house, words such as these are Germanic in origin. Okay. The second sort of big influence that we have in English comes from a particular group of people, and Anya said it earlier, but these are people that came from what we now understand to be Scandinavia. And so this is the Dane or Norse influence that the Vikings brought with them. So the Danes came and invaded Britain or England at that point, and settled here. And with them, they brought their vocabulary. So does anyone know any words in English that are Norse in origin? Any words that are Norse in origin? Does anyone know any words that are Norse in origin? I think we're having some continued issues with connection. My apologies. So if you missed the last bit, I was just explaining how there is an influence from Norse or Dane communities. So what kind of words do we think come from them? Think about the days of the week. What do we call the days of the week in English? There's some examples there that might be a bit more obvious. So what's the word in English for jeudi? What's the word in English for jeudi? Or other words in general anyway? Does anyone know? Does anyone know any words such as this in English? Yes, so Sylvie has said Thursday. This comes from the Norse god Thor. Thor. So it's the day of Thor, Thursday. Yes. We have other days like Friday. We have Wednesday. We have Monday. So Thursday is definitely a Danish origin word. We have the day of Thor. Okay. So we also have other words, particularly words associated with violence that come from Dane or the Norse influence in English. So words such as skull, words such as knife. Yes, you're right, Rosanna. Not all days come from the Danish or Norse influence, but Thursday is from Thor. Okay. The French word for skull. Let me have a look. Le crâne, I think. Yes. So it's the bone of your head structure. Your skull is your head, the bone that makes up your head. So this is skull. So we might say a skull and crossbones. Okay. So the last huge influence that English has actually is very close to home for many of you. It is the Norman influence. So England was conquered by William the Conqueror, who was a Norman king, so a man from Normandy in northern France. And they took over the islands that, well, they took over England and Britain in 1066. They invaded in 1066. There's a very famous tapestry called the Bayern Tapestry, which depicts this. So William the Conqueror and the Normans became a huge part of the English language because they brought with them the Norman language, which is influenced by Latin. And this is why, for the most part, there are many words with French origin in English, or Anglo-Norman origin, I should say. Anglo-Norman. So can anyone give any examples of French words that they know exist in English? It tends to be that French words are of a higher register than, say, Germanic origin words. Mm-hmm. 1066, as Anya has said. Is okay. So who has some French words? Rendezvous, yes. Rendezvous is more of a modern borrowing, I believe. But yes, there are many French words. Education, yes, education. Shampooing is perhaps, again, a modern borrowing. So Rosanna has said weekend. I believe weekend is actually an English word that the French have borrowed, as opposed to the other way around. Okay. Environnement, yes, environment. Yes, there are lots of words such as this in English. There's a very curious phenomenon in English where we can see the difference in culture, because when we talk about farm animals, we usually use Germanic origin words, so pig, cow, sheep, chicken, all these kind of words are more Germanic origin, whereas the words we use for the meat, so the meat that we get from these animals, is usually more French in origin. Things like pork, mutton, poultry, these are all French origin words. So we can see there's a distinction between the two. However, as some of you are perhaps demonstrating in the chat box, there are many words that French has borrowed from English, and some of these words do change in meaning, and we call these pseudo-anglicisms. Pseudo-anglicisms. Okay, so these are words that the French language has taken from English, but changed them in meaning, so they aren't necessarily words you can use in English. A prime example might be footing. Donc, je fais du footing. Footing does not exist in English. We use the word jogging. I go jogging. However, for French speakers, un jogging is a piece of clothing. So you can see there are many words that have been borrowed from English that change in meaning in French, and they don't mean the same thing anymore. Does anyone know any other examples of words that French has taken from English, but whose meanings have changed? Does anyone know any other words, such as jogging, footing? Yes, chewing gum, so chewing gum. This one is kind of the same, so it's okay. So what's the French word, for example, for a car park? A car park. What's the word in French for a car park? So Virginie has said yes, fast food is another example, but this is more of a literal borrowing that is the same in both languages. I'm thinking more words that change. Yes, so Isabel has said parking. So un parking, parking for English people is the gerund form of to park. It's more of a verb. Whereas in French, you say un parking. The English translation is a car park. A car park. Okay. What about table football? Table football. What is table football in French? This is another example of something that makes me laugh when I learn French words like this. What is the word for table football? Yes, a lot of you are talking about sports. Many sports do come from English. Yes, as Françoise has said, le baby-foot. Donc le baby-foot is table football, and this comes from this pseudo-anglicism of baby, so small, and foot from football. But yes, we call it table football. Ping pong, we say ping pong in English, and this is table tennis. Table tennis is ping pong, whereas table football is baby-foot. Okay, awesome. So, what other words can we think of that might be used? So one thing that's important to stress is that English and many languages are still growing and changing and evolving. They rarely stay the same for a long time. So Emma said slow food, awesome. So yes, languages are changing and new words are added all the time. New words are added all the time. And there are many words in English that are still being taken from other languages. For example, English has the word bungalow. Bungalow. Does anyone know where the word bungalow comes from? Does anyone know where the word bungalow comes from? This is a word that's very common in English when we're describing a type of house. So bungalow comes from an Indian language known as Gujarati, so the region of Gujarat. Okay, so it's a word that we've borrowed. What else? What other words do we have in English? What about ketchup? Does anyone know where ketchup comes from? So ketchup is a borrowed word that we've taken and adapted and use in English. So ketchup comes from Southeast Asia, and it's come to us via Chinese from the idea of fish sauce, which I think in turn comes from another language, which I'm not sure about. However, yes, we get this idea of fish, fermented fish or pickled fish sauce, and that's where we get ketchup from. Yes. So Virginie has said America. We don't get ketchup from America. I can tell you a word we get from America, and this is jacuzzi. Jacuzzi comes from American, so you might be forgiven for thinking it's an Italian word. It's actually the name of someone who was an Italian American, but jacuzzi is a word we've gotten from American English. So even various dialects of English influence one another. Another good example might be that in British English we don't tend to use the verb got, or we don't use it as frequently. This is an Americanism that's become more popular with the rise of American media. So we can see that various dialects of American or US English have influenced other dialects of English. So, in summary for today's lesson, English is a widely spoken language that can be seen all over the world. Part of the reason why this language is so widespread is due to the British Empire and colonization. And so that spread the English language as the empire itself spread, much like the French Empire, the Spanish Empire, the Portuguese Empire. These European empires and these European empires spread their language to the places they colonized. So this is why, for example, French is spoken in other parts of the world as well. Okay, in terms of the origins of English, we know it's a Germanic language, but it has an influence from various different parts of the world. So we have sort of the Germanic influences from the Anglo-Saxons. We have the, or Anglo-Frisians. We have the Norse influence from Scandinavia and the Vikings. And we also have the Norman influence, so the French words that we ultimately have in English, which has been an exchange that's gone backwards and forwards now for a while. And of course, English is also growing with words from other languages from around the world. So that brings us to the end of our lesson for today. My apologies if you experience any connection difficulties. Hopefully that will be resolved before our next YouTube live. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your week. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And yes, be sure to tune in next week for our next YouTube live on the history and culture of the British Isles. So merci, bonne soirée à tous et à la semaine prochaine. I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye everyone.